Fiction and reality. New stories, new ideas. Little Beth Entertainment.
Hey, everybody, it is The Rocket Noob with a new podcast from Little Beth Media called The Model Rocket Show at TheRocketryShow.com. And we are starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's The Model Rocket Show with Daniel, the Rocket Noob. The podcast that's all about model rockets you fly in a park and fly in motors G-size or smaller. And now, here's your host, Daniel, the Rocket Noob.
Hey, everybody, it's The Rocket Noob with The Model Rocket Show at TheModelRocketShow.com, a new podcast from Little Beth Media. And you may know me from The Rocketry Show podcast at TheRocketryShow.com. And we've got a new podcast. We're branching out. Why are we doing this? Well, a couple reasons. First of all, The Rocketry Show focuses a lot on high power stuff and really advanced rocketry. And there are a lot of people in the hobby who really either they're beginners or they're long-term rocketeers, and their interest is really model rocketry. There are plenty of people who do high power and low power, and we cover a lot of high power stuff, and we occasionally dip our toes into the low power model rocketry stuff. But they would like a little bit more of that stuff because we do a lot of talk about sort of advanced topics on the Rocketry Show. But your sort of basics, occasionally we touch on that. And, I think the audience there's a couple of different audiences, and I think we want to bring something for the model rocket people who are really into it. And that's kind of why I was brought onto the Rocketry Show in the first place. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But what we're going to cover on this show is everything from build techniques to the history of model rocketry to safety and motors and national events, hopefully. We'll hopefully talk to some manufacturers in the model rocketry business. And it's just going to be a good time. It's going to be stuff for everybody who does low to mid-power model rocketry. And maybe at some point, if there is some interest, we'll talk about first steps into maybe selecting a kit for your first high-power rocket if you're interested in sort of delving and getting involved in that. But mostly what we're going to be focusing on is the model rocket side of things. It's going to be something for everybody, and I hope you get a lot out of it. We'll also take listener questions. If you have any questions, just send us an email, noob@themodelrocketshow.com. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit how I got involved in the hobby, because everyone has a backstory. Everyone has a sort of a rocketeer superhero origin story, how they get involved in the hobby. A lot of people, they did it as kids, and they left it for a while when they got interested in other things as teenagers and came back and became what is known as born-again rocketeers or bars. Some people got involved in the hobby as kids and they never quit and they just kept doing it. So they're long-time rocketeers, old-timers. Myself, I didn't get involved in this hobby as a kid. I got involved in this hobby about 6 years ago when I was 40. And it kind of took me totally by surprise. I have a little bit of a different, I think, origin, a different story from, I think, most people. And that's that I actually got involved in model rocketry through theater, through the arts, through being an actor. So flashback to my childhood, there was one Christmas where I got it was like a themed Christmas that year. Everything I got, most of the presents I got were space and aviation themed because I was kind of into that stuff. I had checked out a bunch of books on space travel from the library. And so I got a plastic model space shuttle that had thousands and thousands of parts. It was a very large Revell space shuttle. I got a little planetarium that had a light bulb in it. You plug it in, you turn it on, and it showed stars on the ceiling. I got a really kind of hard to use, not very good telescope. I got some model airplane stuff, which I played around with a little bit. And I got an Estes launch set. It was a Silver Arrow model rocket launch set. It came with a rocket, came with a launch pad, came with a launch controller. Did not get any motors or engines for the holidays, but it was an easy to assemble kit. And I was real excited about it. I was excited about all the stuff that I got. But I wasn't, look, people in my family are not good at following instructions. I've gotten better at it as an adult, but as a kid, I definitely was not. That's the joke in my family is no one reads instructions. So I, first of all, didn't really know how to put it together because I didn't bother to read the instructions. But I did know that it required some plastic cement. And I know that my F-14 Tomcat model airplane was a mess. It was just a mess of glue. I didn't know what I was doing. My father didn't really have the skills to help me with modeling or anything like that. And I'm going to guess, based on what I know now, that if I had ever put it together, I probably wouldn't have been allowed to get the motors I needed to fly it. So I kind of played around with the launch controller a little bit and, set it aside. And I kept thinking I should build that, and I never did. And I just sort of set it aside, and it eventually got lost to the winds of time. Every occasionally I would think back on it and think, I wish I had flown that thing. It was a neat present. I should have at least tried to build it and launch it, but I never did. Anyway, flash forward to several decades later, and I was probably 38, 39 years old in a Target. And I was going up and down the toy aisles. I used to like to look up and down the toy aisles and see what are toys like today. Because I remember when as a kid, I loved going to toy stores. And they had such cool toys. I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. And the toys were just awesome. And if you're older than me, maybe you think those toys were not good and you like the toys from your era. But every now and then I'm like, sort of check out what's there. And maybe I'd find something weird to sort of decorate my apartment with or something like that. Because I'm kind of a weird sensibility like that. And a weird toy is kind of a cool decoration to me. Anyway, so I'm walking up and down the aisles, and suddenly I see an Estes Silver Arrow model rocket launch set. The exact same model my parents had given me when I was a kid for that Christmas. And my first thought was, I didn't know people still did this. Because as you may know, getting in this hobby, it's kind of an underground hobby. Like, once you're in it, there's a whole world that you didn't know about before you got involved. Or if you've been in it your whole life, you may not realize how unknown this hobby is outside your circle of Rocketeer friends. Honestly, I thought it was a hobby that had maybe died out in the 80s. I'd never heard of it since then. And I'd never seen anyone flying a model rocket. I had not seen a model rocket in a catalog or a store or, anything basically for decades. And I just thought this was a Cold War era hobby for children that had kind of died out. Well, at the time, I was an actor in Bloomington, Indiana, working with a company called the Bloomington Playwrights Project. They do new plays, and so we would develop plays, and so I was one of their main actors. And the artistic director, Chad, was not just a theater artistic director. He was also like a space flight geek. Like, he loved NASA. You'd go to his house, and he loved three things: rabbits, magic, and space flight. So his pet rabbit had a NASA astronaut outfit. I don't really know if he ever dressed the rabbit up as an astronaut, but it did fit. He had model spacecraft, and he had magic books and magic tricks all over the house. Kid at heart. So I immediately texted Chad. I said, "Hey, Chad, if I got a model rocket, would you like to fly it with me?" And he immediately texted back, "Yes." So that was set. But I had other stuff to spend my money on. I wasn't really into rocketry yet. I thought, well, this is fun. Maybe I'll come buy it later or something. Never did. Flash forward a year or two later, and Chad says to me, he comes and picks me up. He says, "Guess what? I've got some model rockets in the trunk. Let's go fly them." So we drove around. First, we kidnapped our friend David. We didn't tell him what we were going to go do, and he was kind of nervous about it. We said, "We got a surprise for you." So we went and we drove around looking for a park that was not too close to traffic and was sizable enough. And the first park we came to was, it had a lot of trees. At the time, I didn't think it had too many trees because I had no experience with this. But we had 5 rockets, and I spent a couple hours out there launching them, and we lost 3 out of 5. We got 2 of them back. We lost 3 out of 5 after flying them a couple times. So we did get some recoveries in. And it was a lot of fun. And I thought, well, maybe I should have a model rocket of my own, just in case we ever do it again. And I was looking for something I went online and I was looking for something that was already pre-built because, again, I didn't think of myself as somebody who could make things or build things. Like I've always admired, DIYers and the makers movement and people who had the skills to put something together and make it look good, or make something from scratch, or, people who just have skills in assembling things and cutting things out and gluing things together and making them look like they want it to look. That was not me, the idea of painting something. I always wanted to be an artist and I just didn't have the skills. So that's why I became an actor. But anyway, so I thought I'd get something pre-made, and I went on to Amazon.com because I didn't know where you got these things. And I started looking up model rockets, and they had an Estes Red Max. And if you're listening to the show, you probably know what a Red Max is. It's black and red. It looks like the Red Baron's airplane. It's a cool looking rocket. And I thought that's a cool looking rocket. But it wasn't pre-assembled. It wasn't pre-painted. You had to build it yourself. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have the skills to do this. So they only had one left. I didn't know if they still made them. And then we had one left. It was like $18. And so I sent away for it. And it came a couple days later. And I was so nervous. It took 4 days, carefully gluing the fins on and putting together. I'd never heard of centering rings. I'd never heard that term, centering rings, before. And, I had to dig out an old X-Acto knife that I had somewhere because I didn't have any tools. I was working on a kitchen table and I had to put down some newspaper because I didn't have any kind of cutting mat or, a decent ruler. But I just took 4 days and I put it together, and then I spray painted it red. And then I was very nervous about putting on decals because I'd never done that before, the water slide decals. I was really careful about it, and they came out pretty good, and they were straight, and I was really happy about that. I ruined a couple of them, so it didn't have all of the decals on, but I couldn't really figure out where they were all supposed to go. And it looked pretty good. So then on the anniversary of the moon landing, which was the 45th anniversary that year, we went out and we had a picnic, and Chad's girlfriend made some cupcakes that looked like the moon, and we just launched a bunch of model rockets. So I had several pre-made rockets that I'd picked up, and I had my Red Max, and it was a hot day, and we just all went out to this big park we found that had no trees, and so we launched rockets, and I got them all back. And then the kicker was when I launched my Red Max, and I got real nervous because I'd spent 4 days on this thing, and I'd never spent 4 days making something. And I was going to launch it into the air and maybe lose it. But we did the countdown. We launched it. It flew so awesomely. It was beautiful. It didn't roll or spin or anything. It had a perfect flight. And then it came down on this skull and crossbones parachute, and it landed softly in the grass, and it was in great condition. It looked beautiful. And then that was it. I was hooked. And so I became obsessed pretty much immediately. After I had flown something that I built and I got it back in one piece, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Like I've had interests before, like for a couple of months or a year. There was a year I was really, really into the Irish tin whistle. Just one of those nerdy passions you get into. And, never really got very good at it. So I've got my tin whistles got them right here in the rocket room, actually. But I don't really play them because I'm not good at it. But I built this rocket, and by the standards now, I've gotten much better at making them look nice. So I look at it now and I can see all the flaws, but it looked much better than I was expecting. The fins were on straight and it flew great. And every time I've flown it, it's flown great. And so then I found out that there was a book. So I got the Kindle edition of the Handbook of Model Rocketry, which I didn't know this was a thing until I got involved in this. And then I found the Rocketry Forum, and I started going to hobby stores and finding out that there were actually model rockets in hobby stores. You could buy them. So I would buy them and I'd build them, and occasionally Chad and I would go fly them. And as I was building them, I was learning a lot, and I was learning a lot fast. I went to Chris Michelson's blog, the Model Rocket Building blog, Model Rocket Building therocketryShow.com. Anyway, so I started building these things, and I really liked the way they were looking. And I thought my friend Chad likes this, but he's a very busy guy. He doesn't really have time to devote to craftsmanship. He slaps them together, launches them, loses them, and then several months later, he has time to lose some more. We're going to take a quick break to talk about our sponsor, eRockets.biz, and we'll be right back. eRockets.biz. It's your home for unique model rocket kits. They've been in business since 2009, and eRockets doesn't just stock many of your favorite in-production kits. They also produce their own versions of popular out-of-production models, many of which you've come to enjoy over the years if you're a long-term rocketeer. They also produce the Semrock line of model rockets, and they've got a new model I want to tell you about. It's called the Stellar Arrow. This is a Semrock kit. If you've never built a Semrock kit, they are high-quality parts, just beautifully made models. Now, this one is very interesting. It was designed as a collaboration by the Right Stuff Rocketeers, which is the section of the National Association of Rocketry to which Randy Bodway, who owns eRockets, belongs. And they do a lot of build nights at eRockets. I'm really jealous of those guys because they get to hang out in this cool rocket hobby shop all the time, once a month for their build nights. And this rocket features, first of all, it's about BT-60 size. So it's 1.64 inches in diameter. That's, if you are kind of new to rocketry, it's the same diameter as like a Big Bertha or a Dured Max. It's got 3 fins, which are laser cut plywood. And these fins look like, how do I describe this? They look like a stylized cutout of the fletching you would see on an arrow. It's called a Stellar Arrow. It's the name of the rocket kit. And so they've got these sort of lines cut out of the middle of the fins, and they're really, really cool looking. Also features a tapered motor retainer. That means instead of a hook, you get a tapered retainer on the back. That means you got a boat tail on the back, or a tail cone on the back, which is really cool looking. Also features their screw together body tube coupler. This is something you find with some Semrock kits. Instead of gluing the body tube together with glue and paper, you actually have a screw coupler where you screw the rocket together in the middle, which is really cool. The graphics were designed by Jeff Kotis, which is real interesting. If you are also a fan of The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com, you may have heard a recent episode we did with Jeff Kotis where we talked about 3D printing for model rocketry and high-power rocketry. Well, he's got his fingers in a lot of pies, and he did the graphics for this kit. This is a really nice kit. That's the Semrock Stellar Arrow model rocket kit. You can get it at eRockets.biz. Check out eRockets.biz today to learn more. eRockets.biz. If rocketry scares you, buy a train set. All right, we are back now. Where was I? I thought my friend Chad likes this, but he's a very busy guy. He doesn't really have time to devote to craftsmanship. He slaps them together, launches them, loses them, and then several months later, he has time to lose some more. But, he didn't really have time to sort of delve into this hobby the way I was starting to become obsessed with it. So I thought, well, I really like what I'm doing. I've got to find a place. I started taking pictures. I've got to have a place to put pictures. So I thought I'll put them online. And so I thought, well, you could start a free blog, right? So I went to blogger.com and I started a blog. And the first thing I came up with was the Rocketeer's Journey, which I thought to myself, I don't think I would read that. And I'm obsessed. So I deleted that after 24 hours and I was like, I need to have a title for this blog because I want to put pictures up what I'm doing. And it just struck me. I'm a newbie. So I called it The Rocket Noob. rocketnoob.blogspot.com. The noob is spelled with zeros because that's NetSpeak. That's what, I was making a joke. And I started writing and I started posting pictures. And very quickly, it became a thing where what I was really trying to do, I didn't expect anyone to ever find this blog. And I very quickly decided, I just started writing it and I was going to share it on Facebook for my friends to find, hoping that one of them or two of them would maybe see this and go, this is kind of an interesting hobby. He's making stuff. He's learning how to paint things and they look pretty and it's challenging, but not hard. And it's kind of fun. And, maybe if I got one or two people to come to see a model rocket launch, because that's really what gets people. The first time you go see a model rocket launch, even if you're kind of skeptical of it, it's surprising. They fly really high. They're exciting. Even your B and C motors, those can be really exciting. So I kind of just started writing it, hoping to lay out the basics of the things that I'd learned from the Handbook of Model Rocketry and Apogee newsletters, which I discovered by then, and other sources. And, so I started writing this blog for beginners. At one point, I considered doing a podcast because I know a lot of comedians. I know a lot of people who do podcasts. It's always something I kind of wanted to do, but I was the only person who was into this. And I thought, well, what's this going to be? Me talking to myself like I'm doing right now? And I just didn't think that, I didn't know how to make it interesting. And then I discovered this podcast called The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. I started listening to that. Well, now, if you've listened to The Rocketry Show, especially if you're a beginner, you know that some episodes they might be a little over your head. And fortunately, I had become so obsessed that I started reading about all this stuff to do with high power rocketry. Like I read about dual deployment. I understood how that kind of worked. I was still just building my little Estes kits, but at least I could follow along. But CG and GEM at the time, they were mostly talking about advanced high power stuff. And at this point, I had put the Rocket Noob blog on my signature on the Rocketry forum, and I was starting to get people looking at it. And then out of the blue, I got this email from CG at the Rocketry Show saying, hey, we found your blog. You're interesting. We'd like to talk to you. And so they were going to interview me and because they didn't have a lot of model rocket stuff for beginners. And so I came on and I recorded an interview. I was very nervous. And then I moved to Boston from Bloomington, Indiana. And then some delays happened and CG was like, yeah, I think we need to re-record that because some things went wrong with it. And it was good because I think I said a few things during the first interview that they were so naive at the time that I would be embarrassed to have them out there now. But we recorded another interview and we had good chemistry. And so CG was like, why don't you just be on the show? So here I'd gone from being a guy with an unpaid actor doing some fun theater stuff that I then accidentally discovered this rocketry thing. And then I started reading about it and I started publishing this blog. And then suddenly I'm on this podcast. It was kind of mind blowing. And then I came out to Boston, and Bloomington, Indiana has a lot of open parks and it's pretty easy to go fly some model rockets if you want to. Boston's a little different. There's a lot of built up areas and there are parks, but I was like, I don't know people here. I don't know what the police are like here. I don't want to go to a park and launch rockets and get in trouble. And so I started looking around and, I read a couple things where the police in Boston had stopped some people from launching some rockets in a park. And, I was like, well, I don't know what to do here. So I thought, well, I got to look and see if there's got to be a club locally. Because at this point I discovered, there's a National Association of Rocketry and they have clubs. Maybe it's time for me to join one of those. So I discovered CMAS, which is the Central Massachusetts Space Modeling Society. It's a section of the National Association of Rocketry. I went ahead and after a couple of years being involved in the hobby, I joined the association. I started getting the magazine. I thought that was so cool. I had a little card with a rocket on it. And that was really cool. I had $1 million in insurance, which was really cool. And so I went to my first launch and I was so nervous. And as I was preparing my rockets, I thought, there are other people out there and they're preparing rockets too, just like me. I'm not doing this alone. So then I went to my first launch in September of that year. And it was the Fliskits Memorial or Fliskits Anniversary launch, not Memorial. They're still around. I saw some high power rockets, which I'd never seen. I'd only read about. And there were all these people with their rockets and, of different craft levels of craftsmanship. I was really nervous. I was like, my rockets aren't going to be good looking enough. And I got out there and I was like, oh, no, you don't have to be as good as the best rocket you've seen on the internet. You just build it and fly it. And, So my very first one was a 2-stage scratch build that I had made, and it was my very first scratch build, and I launched it, and it drifted away on the wind. I never saw it again. But I had a pretty good day, and I was nervous because it's just a little different out here in New England than it is in the Midwest. I find a little harder to get to know people sometimes, but you go to a rocketry event, you talk to a few people, and it's, you've got friends there. So I talked to the officers running the table, and eventually I went to dinner with them. And now I'm a member of CMAS. I've been going every time I go to a launch. I always go to dinner with the core members who, they've become really good friends, and been on the Rocketry Show for a number of years. I got to interview astronauts and go to conventions. I got to be at Narcon last year and see the SpaceX Crew Dragon launch right there in the middle of the night from my parking lot of my hotel. It's been a crazy, wild ride. I was not expecting this at all. And most importantly, this has become a hobby about which I'm passionate. I've learned to make things. I've been hired a couple of times to teach kids at summer camps to make things. I've seen them go from never having built a rocket to building something that flew and that came back in one piece, usually, and they were really proud about it. And it can change lives. The whole reason once I got into doing the Rocket Noob, I was like, I want other people to know about this hobby because it's so exciting. And I've been doing it for now 6 years. I abandoned the tin whistle after a year, along with all the other hobbies and passions that I got into. But the rocketry thing, I have an entire room in our apartment now that's devoted to rockets. I'm sitting there right now. I got dozens of them. I got lots and lots of stuff to build. And it's just the most fun, exciting thing that I've done in a long time. And I don't know about you, but I know when I first got involved in this, there was something about this hobby that I just got really excited about. And I was like, I know that I'm just building little model rockets here, but something about this feels important. This feels like some kind of calling or something. Now, I wasn't expecting to do a podcast. I wasn't expecting to get involved in the National Association of Rocketry in the ways that I have. I wasn't expecting to talk to an astronaut. I wasn't expecting to teach kids how to build and fly model rockets, but something about it felt important. And, it's become the rocketry community for me, those are my closest friends here in Massachusetts. And I don't see them as often as I would like to, but it's become really important in my life. It's become part of my identity. I'm the guy, among my coworkers and people I know locally, I'm the guy who builds rockets. And if you're interested in building rockets, I'll teach you how to do it. I'll show you how to do it. So that's what we're doing with this podcast. We're talking model rockets. And so we're going to discuss build techniques. We're going to talk about motors. If you have any questions, you can email me at noob@themodelrocketshow.com. That's N00B. That's how you spell noob. noob@themodelrocketshow.com. And I'll try and answer it. It's a new podcast. You probably got a pretty good shot at getting your questions answered. If you want to record a question on your phone or what have you, and email that, if it's a good question and the audio is not too bad, maybe we'll put you on the show if you're interested. I hope you like the show. We got a lot more stuff coming along the way. We have tons of ideas for episodes, so I don't know what the next one's going to be. This is just an introduction. I hope you like it. If you like this podcast and you know other people who would as well, please share it with your friends. It's the Model Rocket Show at themodelrocketshow.com. Please tell a friend about it. If you're a beginning rocketeer who, the Rocketry Show had some topics on it listen, here's the thing about the Rocketry Show is I'm pretty well versed in a lot of aspects of rocketry, but I mostly do low power stuff. Well, there are some episodes where even I'm not totally sure what's going on. And you can tell if you listen to those episodes because I'm usually quiet for most of the episode. I have to listen to the whole conversation before I have any comments or questions at the very end. because I got nothing to contribute. I'm in a little over my head. I do high power rocketry and I like all that kind of stuff, but every now and then we have a topic where I'm like, yep, this is new territory for me. So yeah, if you like the show and you want to hear more and you want the show to be better, first of all, tell a friend about it. Secondly, if you got time, just go to your podcasting app or platform and give us a review. That always helps people find the podcast. And if you really want to support the show and you want to give us a couple of bucks, you can always donate to Patreon. We don't have a separate one here for the Model Rocket Show, but we are, of course, tied to the Rocketry Show. So if you want to kick a couple of bucks a month to help support the Rocketry Show and the Model Rocket Show, then just go to patreon.com/The Rocketry Show, and you'll have access to extras on there. If you become one of our patrons on Patreon, we always appreciate that. That really has made the Rocketry Show sustainable and better. And we're hoping that it'll make this podcast, the Model Rocket Show, bigger and greater than what it is right now, which is just me sitting in my rocket room talking to you. Whatever you can do to contribute, whatever you can do, just mostly just share it with your friends and enjoy the show. Hope you like the show, and I'll catch you next time.